BoJack Horseman may be one of the greatest television shows ever made, and most of the world will never know. Animated series are not a widely respected medium in which to storytell upon. Many likely see the thumbnail and either see something targeted to children or young crude adult humor. And while the latter is entirely accurate, it's not giving the potential viewer an integral picture of what they're about to watch. Many animated shows suffer from this discrimination because a person watched an episode of a popular animated series and saw that it had a nonsensical premise and then discounted it before a comedic or meaningful outcome was produced. Shows like Avatar: The Last Airbender have some genuinely goofy bits, but at the same time are telling one of the greatest stories ever. I highly recommend that show as well, but today we're talking about BoJack Horseman, which is incredibly different from cartoons of yesterday. It's very dark and weighs on your soul in some of the most introspective ways possible. BoJack Horseman is a captivating story of a man's journey with addiction and his aging, degraded place in society, specifically Hollywood. It's a commentary about Hollywood, about men's and women's issues, and I think most accurately, it's a commentary about being a flawed human, or just being human. It can be extremely funny one second and then extremely reflective the next. The writing on the show is complex and nuanced, and even after viewing the entirety of the show multiple times, this animated series about a horse makes me feel something new every time. It opens your eyes to the world in many ways, giving insight into the emotionally taxing parts of other people's lives that you just don't really think about much. I had a really hard time writing the script for this video. I wanted to scream from the rooftop that this show is amazing and you should watch it because it's amazing, but it wouldn't convince me. And I too wish to know why this show and its characters, as ridiculous as they are, have captured the last 6 years of my life and have affected me so dearly. I don't know how to best describe what this show is, nor do I know how to express exactly what it meant to me. I mean, BoJack is a seriously flawed character, but he's written in such a way that we want him to excel because in some way we're BoJack and we don't want to accept that maybe the thing holding us back in life is us, and that maybe sometimes things are shitty because we made them shitty. I think as the seasons go on and more of the characters develop, they also allow you to insert yourself into a more empathetic path of, say, Diane. Diane and BoJack have a very complicated friendship starting in season 1, and these are the characters I feel that I most relate to. I'm Diane in certain situations, and I'm very much BoJack in others. And when they tackle things like depression or genuinely being there for other people, those are the scenes that really got me. At one point, Diane spirals into a depressive state and is really in a bad way. This season was around the same time that I personally dealt with depression, and BoJack did something uncharacteristic of himself and uncharacteristic of most people that are dealing with a depressed friend. He cleaned her house. I didn't really think much of this when it happened. It was a nice gesture, but the more I really thought about the level of friendship you would need to invite yourself over to someone's messy home that has been neglected for weeks because, you know, those dishes are just a little too much to deal with right now, and take that burden onto yourself, that's really something special. He cleaned her apartment and left, and I don't think we ever saw him get a thank you for that. He didn't need one. He was genuinely acting for her because he cared. I wanted to be both BoJack and Diane. I wanted for anyone to do that for me, something as intimate as an unkept home, not to judge me, but to take it from me and give me resolve and comfort, making me feel like, hey, I'm not alone, you know, people care. But equally, I wanted to do that for someone else, to just serve a friend in dire need, scrub their home of the stresses of yesterday so that when it's time for them to pick themselves up and look up again, they aren't weighed down by those depressive choices. All of that conversation was from a scene that lasts not even 2 minutes of the entire episode. My point in bringing up this very personalized connection to the show is that it's honestly the only way to show you what you'll gain by watching it. So many times BoJack was the villain, not because he acted maliciously per se, but because he didn't know any better. Often because he saw money, sex, power, and acted on impulse like many of us do. He does some pretty inexcusable things in the show, and in the end, Well, I mean, you really decide if he can be forgiven or not. But at the same time, it's asking, should you be forgiven? Should those shitty moments in your life, the ones that you try to purge from your mind, however big or small, should those shitty things define you? Should they haunt you for eternity? Or are we truly a reformable being? And to railroad you out of that thought, just as the show would, now let's talk about something funny. It's almost like the writers want you to think about it later on, and maybe not be force-fed their opinions, which, another reason the show is so good. At one perfectly prim point, Piggy here ponders perceptively about the deaths of BoJack's jacked-up friend, and speaks slick, quick quips in solemn shadows of alliteration until she finds something. While many characters speak in elaborate and original idioms, they created a universe where they can just throw in a character who speaks specifically in this way, and it's not questioned at all. In fact, when she goes off on these rants about her investigation, it is hilariously impressive that writers sat down to plot all of this out, and someone actually performed this who sounds like a southern lass's accent. It's brilliant.
I shall miss making mincemeat of the misdeeds of mischievous miscreants, but I must focus on my new mission as I transition from Miss to Mrs.
Why do you talk like that? We're from Fresno.
The show is brave and does the unconventional more times than not, which brings me to my very favorite episode, Free Churro. Now, there's 4 or 5 that contend for this #1 spot, and I've seen hardcore fans type to exhaustion about why they think one is better than the other, and it really can be a pretty intense debate, oddly enough, weirdly enough. But for me, when I watched this, it set the bar that I haven't really seen another episode surpass. BoJack Horseman had a pretty terrible childhood, and when one of his family members dies later in life, no spoilers, he gives the eulogy at their funeral. Now, on my first watch, it was a good 15 minutes before I realized what was happening, that he was still giving a speech and what this show was trying to do. I was giddy. I mean, if any show could do something this bold, entertainingly this bold, it would be BoJack Horseman. And sure enough, the rest of the episode goes by, a 26-minute episode of just BoJack talking at this funeral. And it was funny. I mean, it developed his character quite rapidly. It showed a true-to-life realization of the final moments of this person in his life, and it showed the struggle he was having internally about the death. But the entire thing was this sad verbal march off a cliff, and it was funny. He was using humor, something that has comforted him his entire life, as a mask. As the episode goes on, we see this mask chip away until his true feelings about the death are revealed. How it truly felt to know this person laying before them, and what they would have wanted for him to say while he stands up there rambling about free churros. It was a masterpiece, and I think it accurately represents when you just can't process the death of a family member, let alone an estranged family member like it was in this case. The only other people involved in this episode were the horrified funeral attendees, who we hear gasps from throughout the episode, but don't actually see until the last few seconds, and an off-screen musician providing a boom-ts terribly to comedic moments in his speech. Then, in those final few seconds, the showrunners subvert our expectations and reveal something that changes the entire episode we watched. It is brilliant. I honestly could talk about it for hours. But the show also attacks the idea of closure. It challenges that in real life, you often don't get that Hollywood ending level of closure. People just try their best to be the best they can, and then they die. It doesn't have some grand ending with all the pieces fitting together with beautiful retrospective tale to pass on to your children. We make that up, and BoJack very much lives in a world where even when he tries to apologize for the errors he made, he's denied. He's told that he doesn't get to feel better about himself by saying sorry anymore, like it excuses his continuous bad action. He can be sorry and live in that remorse for the rest of his life because, his apology aside, he still caused this person's harm. It's kind of the impact versus intent argument. Then later on, when he searches for answers at the bottom of a bottle, he's confronted with his own life being ruined. He's told outright that you can't just keep doing shitty things, and genuinely being sorry that they happened. You need to just be better. BoJack understands this at some point, and we see a reoccurring night sky appear in the background when it normally wouldn't. This is kind of that confirmation that he's now getting it. He feels great regret about his decisions, about the person that he hurt, and the reason why he's seeing those stars everywhere he looks. He then makes the correct changes to ensure it won't happen again, but he's flawed, just like all of us. So who really knows how long it'll last? BoJack Horseman is a cautionary tale about only being happy at the end of your project. It's about the toxicity that arrives when your happiness directly correlates to an ending. It wagers that you mustn't invest your time into something expecting happiness at the end. You shouldn't write a book because you think it'll make you happy. You need to make sure that you are happy throughout that journey. If you haven't experienced this, it may sound like nonsense, and I totally get that. I mean, I really do get that. The show continually has these moments layered in that you should not put your happiness on end goals, and equally other people. You know, you are responsible for your happiness, and that is really what the show is trying to tell you. As I wrap this video up, I just want to remind you that BoJack is a comedy. It's incredibly thorough, intelligent humor that, you know, you'll pick up new things every time you watch it, but it deals with serious parts of your life, and you should be ready for both sides of that emotional ride. I've had a few episodes really get to me on a personal level and haven't really been able to quantify why I'm upset, but take your time, watch this show. For me, it's been a deeply personal thing that I've fallen in love with, and I really hope that you find at least a little bit of enjoyment from it as well. Life is a beautiful thing. We're all here. We're all able to think and do and breathe and be whatever we want to be. But sometimes life is a bitch, and then you just got to keep living. And that's what this show is about. Thank you so much for being here. I really, really enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed it as well. Thank you to all my wonderful Patreon supporters, Robert Holtz, Micheal, Linck, among many others. You make these videos possible. Much love, everybody, and I can't wait to talk to you all again soon.
A song you taught me when I was small. Don't stop dancing. Don't stop dancing.